Boy, do I have a story for you guys. There's this guy. If I had a penny for every video of mine that starts that way, there's this guy. There's this guy who on and off for a few years has reached out to me on grindr. And this guy is discreet, AKA DL, on the down low. Not openly gay. Let me just start by saying I actively stay away from DL guys. Some of them are fine, are sexy as hell, but they're a headache, right? They're a headache because it's always like a game or an effort to get basic communication going or basic reciprocation of photos to even know what they look like. So this guy in particular, always an empty profile. The stats would be filled out, like his age, height, a little bit about him, whatever, but photos always missing. So the kind of interaction where you have to ask for photos, which is a headache in itself and like so absurd. Whenever I tell my straight friends about this, especially female friends, they're like, what? Like, A, why are there empty profiles on apps like grindr? And B, you actually even respond? So sometimes I'll respond if from the stats the guy seems like my type, even without photos. And some of them are actually, again, superficially speaking, if you're just looking for some casual fun, some of these guys are sexy, but it's always a headache. And at this stage in the game, in my 30s, I stay away from guys like this because it always feels like it's a game. But this guy would keep reaching out here and there. And by the way, when he would send photos, when I would ask, they were always expiring photos, like you can only see it once. And it was always like, it's his back showing, or his arm is in the way of half his face. So it's like I could tell he was a good looking guy, a sexy guy. But again, just a headache. So I would always stop responding and then he would follow up again, let's say 6 months later. I should also mention that he's like 10 miles away. So that in itself would always make me be very quick to just stop responding or lose interest, because it's like on top of the DL thing, you're also 10 miles away, like get the fuck out of here. But a few weeks ago, I had a moment of weakness and he happened to be 3 or 4 profiles away, which means not only walking distance, but literally like 10 to 20 blocks away. I had a moment of weakness. I knew that he was into me, right? So I'm like, you know what? Let me just reach out to him while he's around. It's worth mentioning, I was only looking for something casual, zero depth. And I even went about the interaction thinking this guy's just gonna be like, a deadbeat, like this is purely physical for me. So I made all these assumptions just based on the little information I had so far of him being sort of difficult to communicate with, to get transparency from. Guys, we met up and it was electric, the connection. First, let me just say, remember, expiring photos. So I don't remember exactly what he looked like in the photos, but I feel like it wasn't him. The guy in person was much sexier. I've had that happen a few times before where a guy looks different in person, but he actually looks better in person. Like the guy in person is, I'm pretty sure, a different human, but a sexier human than the human in the photos. Obviously that's better than the alternative of the guy in the images being sexier than the guy in person, which I've also experienced, and that's not ideal. But so this is a very interesting conundrum to me, that a guy would present himself as less attractive than the guy in person. Anyway, I digress. So we meet up and the connection was intense on both ends. Like he seemed to be really into me based on the things he was saying and doing, and vice versa. But also beyond just the superficial physicality, he was really nice and like really thoughtful. So it's confusing because it's almost like I didn't want to like this guy. This was just a one-time thing in my mind. But then the guy that I met, I was actually like, oh, you're actually like, I would want to get to know you. Of course, in my mind, I'm thinking as this is happening, like, don't get too involved. This guy has been a headache via communicate. Like he will fuck up your life. This is not worth investing in. This guy was clearly educated, polished, also built like a football player. That's a nice juxtaposition of qualities. And it's such an enigma to me that it's not the first time I've encountered a guy who's DL or discreet, who's super charming and respectful and even considerate. And in my mind, those guys aren't supposed to be like that because they're sort of playing games and they don't know what they want and they're not forthright. But I think it's because guys who are like this have been indoctrinated with how a straight man is supposed to act, how he's supposed to treat women with courtship. And I think that ends up carrying over into how they treat guys that they meet. And also, I think they probably get fewer opportunities to meet somebody because, again, if they're not being transparent, if they're not being open, if they're a headache to communicate with. I'm assuming that most gay guys aren't willing to go through all those hoops. I mean, I wasn't, but then he kept trying and he happened to be right place at the right time. So this is fascinating to me. I'm like, why can't more openly gay guys on apps like Grindr be that thoughtful and pleasant and kind? So it was a mind fuck for me because I'm like, wait, I don't want to like you this much when I just wanted a casual thing. But we both walked away from hanging out like, oh, I like you, like I kind of like this. But that DL factor always creeps up. And so he was like, text me your number, I'll message you on WhatsApp, which I found interesting because he's American and WhatsApp is typically more of an international person thing. I feel like Americans don't really use WhatsApp as much. Sure enough, there was a reason he wanted to use WhatsApp. I sent him my number on Grindr after we hooked up and he messaged me back on WhatsApp. And he had this feature activated that I've never seen on WhatsApp before where all messages disappear after 24 hours. So I'm like, oh, this is why he wanted to use WhatsApp instead of just texting normally through iMessage, right? So literally, he was like, hey, it's me, great meeting you, you're so kind, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, the feeling is mutual. Within a day, all the messages disappeared. So that little instinct inside my head was like, don't even engage. If this guy's in the neighborhood again and he reaches out, you can have your fun. But these guys are emotionally unavailable and it's so frustrating how you can have chemistry. With this guy, I have to say, best chemistry I've had with somebody, physically and emotionally, I'd say at least in a few years. And that's the mind-blowing part of this, that it doesn't even make sense. But I think in his particular case, he's somebody who craves connection, but has these hangups clearly that then he only wants to message you on a disappearing chat mode, which is like so absurd to me. He messaged me on Christmas, by the way, to say Merry Christmas. Of course, the message disappeared the next day. But I'm like, who is this person? Nobody says Merry Christmas to me, except like family and close friends. Guys like this, even though they don't come off gay, like in terms of stereotypes of mannerisms and stuff, even though the average person would never think he's into guys, I did start to wonder if people in his personal life have an instinct. Because I've noticed a theme with guys like this, which is that you can sense they have a wall up. Like even though there was something there chemistry-wise, I still could feel some kind of resistance on his part, or almost like a nervousness maybe. And I feel like some people, especially nowadays, people are more aware than ever of if they sense all these walls with a man, oftentimes it's like he's hiding something, right? He's either cheating or he's got skeletons in his closet. And I feel like women in particular are very intuitive with this kind of thing. So everything about it is fascinating to me, that he's living this whole persona and then using an app to meet guys anyway, but just living right on the fringe, 1 foot in the door, 1 foot out, to preserve this image that for all he knows isn't working anyway. Or maybe it is, I don't know, but it's just so peculiar to me because emotionally I could feel that he wanted more, that he wants intimacy. Some guys you meet, they're just looking for something purely physical, no questions asked, no conversation. And then you meet guys who you can tell part of sexuality for them is intimacy. It is for me, for sure. And so then you click with somebody because you realize you both are on that wavelength, but one of you happens to not have come to terms maybe with his desires. All right, now I'm rambling, but I'm very curious what you guys think about this. Does this experience sound very familiar to you? Have you experienced this yourself? Have you been that guy yourself? Let me know in the comments.